Sorry, it's gonna start playing RDC because every time I go to YouTube, excuse me, excuse me, it always opens up that video for whatever reason. No, we go to playlists, history vids. Stop! No, I didn't want to play all the history vids. Okay, we'll do this one. I still have this D-Day one, but we've done so many World War II recently. We're gonna do something completely random, completely out of the blue. Welcome to another episode of Maniacs of History. This is episode 11. We have a part of history that isn't talked about very much. One of the greatest conquerors, arguably the greatest conqueror to ever live. People say that if you live in live in Asia, I think it's like a 40% chance that you are this man's descendant, something like that. Today we are doing a documentary on Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire. I don't think it's the entire Mongol Empire. I think it's this one war that they fought versus Japan. So we got Genghis Khan versus whoever the hell was the leader of Japan at the time. Let's get into this thing, man.
The Mongol Empire had, under the leadership of Genghis Khan, known to us as Genghis Khan, transitioned from a series of often squabbling tribes nestled in the Mongolian steppes to, by 1206, a unified entity. Genghis Khan would die in 1227, but his lands would be enlarged and further consolidated by his descendants. One of those, his grandson, Hushay Han, or Kublai Khan, who would expand the empire to its greatest extent.
Damn. Hold on. Look at this.
Expand the empire to its greatest extent.
That's literally from Japan to fuck. I don't know. I'd say maybe like the Czech Republic, around that area, because it's not as far to Italy yet. So not Germany, but I think that's probably like the Czech, probably around like Romania area. That's insane. It's literally all across Asia.
The Mongol Empire would grow with spectacular military successes, crushing kingdoms in all direction under hoof and arrow. The savagery and mobility with which the Mongol forces carried out their expansion
Vienna. Where's
was
Vienna?
equal to that point in time. The Mongols' mobility born out of the steppes, a byproduct of their nomadic lifestyle. While the horses they rode were not the fastest, each Mongol rider would often have several and rotate between them so they all got a break from being mounted. They could cover up to 160
Austria.
kilometers.
So he went from Japan to Austria.
Fast and unpredictably, like a storm
insane.
distant on the horizon one moment, then a sweeping maelstrom directly overhead the next. Along with their successes, there would also be some spectacular failures. One of those would be the small isolated island nation of Japan. They would send the winds of war Japan's way, and Japan would counter with a storm of defiance. The Japanese had managed to avoid direct contact and conflict with the Mongol Empire, as they had no official diplomatic relations with either of their direct neighbors, China or Korea. Other than trade and raiding, they kept to themselves and their own affairs. The Mongols, though, had heard of Japan as being a land of much gold and riches. Marco Polo had written this about Japan: "The people on the island of Zipangu have measureless quantities of gold. The king's palace is roofed with pure gold, and the floors are paved in gold, 2 fingers thick." This account was likely known to the Khan, as Japan as a source of gold production had been well known to the rulers of China. There are written accounts that previous delegations from China in earlier centuries had returned home with kilogram upon kilograms of gold. These and other accounts all contributed to the legend of Japan as a land of gold, but in fact, Japan was more a land of silver. The Khan may have also had other more personal reasons for the invasion. In 1266, Kublai Khan sent 2 envoys to Japan with a letter stating that the 2 countries should establish friendly relations. However, there were statements made in the letter that, while perhaps common for the Mongols, the Japanese perceived as insulting. The mention of their emperor as a mere king for one, and the veiled hints at becoming a tributary vassal state the other. The most egregious, though, perhaps, was the last paragraph, which seemed to imply the threat of war for non-compliance. The end result of this first official contact would be envoys returning back empty-handed, as would a second set of envoys in 1268, and Additional ones sent in 1269, 1271, and 1272, but those Japan would not even allow to land on their shores. Japan had since the late 1100s been ruled by a military dictatorship located in Kamakura under the control of the Hojo. The emperor, whose court resided in Kyoto, was functionally more of a figurehead. The Emperor Kamiyama's chamberlain had written an edict stating that an Inui curse would be levied against the Mongols. This, coupled with the later tsunami storm, would lay the foundation for future divinity legends surrounding the protection of Japan. The Japanese culture would continue to meld divinity and nature as they had since their animist past, even under Buddhism and Shintoism. The samurai was also likened to cherry blossoms, as his life, while glorious, was prone to sudden end during military service, similar to petals shed by cherry blossoms. As indicated previously, the real power in Japan lay with the Kamakura shogunate. Technically under the shogun, but in reality its de facto head was Hojo Tukimune, who had inherited the title as the sixth reigning Hojo Shikin, or regent, from his father in 1256 due to his father's failing health. Neither the Khan
They totally
nor the
said
Hojo
chicken.
would directly take
It's
part in
not
the
what the
fighting
guy
of what's
said.
to come. Two armies that
The
differed
subtitles, I
considerably
mean.
in appearance, tactics, and armaments. While both prided themselves as horseback archers, their approach to it was very different. The samurai firing the arrows on horseback were heavily armored in the 13th century, and they rode smaller horses than the Mongols did. While the Mongols also had heavy cavalry, their archers tended to be organized in a looser configuration than their Japanese counterparts, and they were more light cavalry armor-wise. The Mongols would deliver their also shorter arrows in huge volleys from their ranks, whereas the Japanese method was to send but a single arrow against a chosen and hopefully worthy opponent to earn him honor and glory on the battlefield. The tactical formation of the Japanese was more warband in approach, with each led by a prominent samurai and his followers. As mentioned, the Japanese would traditionally send the single arrow with a special signaling tip that would whistle as it flew to initiate the combat. The Mongols, meanwhile, fought with more rank-and-file structure, often using drums to signal battlefield maneuvers. They had also access to Chinese inventions such as exploding grenade-like bombs made of both paper and iron and delivered by catapults. These were among the first examples of gunpowder explosions heard in Japan. The samurai arms and armor consisted of the following.
Damn, you came in with bombs and you didn't win?
Scales tied together and lacquered, then combined into armor plates by binding them together with silk, cords, or ones made of leather. This created a flexible defensive armor capable of absorbing the high-impact energy of enemy blows. Both iron and leather were used, as a fully iron suit was deemed too heavy. Thus the iron was used for the most protective portions of the armor. The body of the Yoroi armor consisted of four main sections: two large shoulder plates fastened at the back by a large ornamental bow, with two guards to protect the tying cords from being cut. Then there were the arm sections that provided free movement while keeping the body covered. Next was the helmet made from iron plates, fastened together with large projecting conical rivets, with the neck protected via a heavy 5-piece neck guard. Some samurai would also wear face masks. Generally, the shooting arm was kept armor-free to more easily allow arrows to be fired quickly and efficiently. Each samurai would also have a sword forged by a celebrated master, and it was one of the most prized gifts that a samurai could receive from a leader. These swords were almost reaching their zenith of perfection by the time of the Mongol invasions. Their long, curved blades were razor-sharp and could cut deeply into the brigandine-like coats of enemies like the Mongols. Lastly,
I believe it.
Bow. They were longer bows made out of deciduous wood and backed with bamboo for added reinforcement. They were lacquered to weatherproof them and used bamboo arrows.
Swords can cut.
On horseback, the bow
cut
was
like
held
crazy.
high to the head to clear the horse, with the drawing hand pulled back to the ear. In contrast, the Mongol army, while often said to have been lightly armored, was in fact very diverse. While the common soldiers and horseback archers were more lightly armored, the Mongols also had contingents of heavy cavalry units, who appear depicted in the Japanese-Mongol invasion scrolls. The lighter armor worn by those lighter units formed the foundation for all units, including the heavier armored ones. There was a heavy coat fastened by a leather belt at the waist, which also carried the sword, dagger, and sometimes even an axe. Boots were stout but comfortable and made from felt and leather. The head covered in a hat made of felt and fur. The heavier armored units had over top of this a coat made in the Asiatic style of lamellar armor, which consisted of small scales of iron or leather, or combined, and then pierced with holes and sewn together via leather thongs. They wore helmets made from a number of large iron pieces.
Oh, shit. Hold on. What is... Wendy Wu Homecoming Warrior.
And featured iron-plated neck guards, much
That's
like
where
the samurai armor.
I know where that's
The heavy
from.
cavalry horses would likewise be protected by lamellar
There
armor.
was that thing
Mongol
she
bows
fought
were shorter
in
than
that
the Japanese
armor.
ones. They were composite reflex bows in design, made from yak horn, sinew, and bamboo glued together into a single set piece. The bow was strung against the natural curve,
That sword
giving
is
it an exceptionally strong
nasty.
pull.
What the
Each
hell?
archer typically carried multiple bows and a quiver with both regular and poison-tipped arrows. They also carried rounded, wooden shields for personal protection, and their swords were slightly curved and saber-like in design. By 1271, the Mongols had dealt successive blows to the Chinese Song dynasty south of the growing Mongol Empire. The impact of this was the symbolic transition of the Mongol Empire from nomadic dwellers in tents to the more sedentary rulers of a civilized state. The Mongols had crept even closer to Japan by initiating an invasion of Korea in the year 1231. Despite valiant efforts by both its military and civilians, the Mongol attacks were relentless.
Oh, that's what
In moments of
I was
peace
about to
or
say.
defense, the Mongols would send
They
in
had
wave
Korea
after wave,
too?
and eventually, by 1259, the Koreans, battle-weary, capitulated. By the year 1273,
They did have
the Mongols
Korea
had
too.
unified the Korean invasion by marrying themselves into the Korean royal family. They would now have two separate coastal areas with which to launch an invasion against Japan. Numbers for the invasion fleet and the Japanese defenders for the first invasion attempt vary wildly. The likely numbers for the Mongol expedition force likely 30,000 strong with hundreds of ships. The Japanese force, based on the number of samurai band and average number of each, indicated that their forces likely numbered between 4 and 8,000. This would indicate a ratio of Mongol to Japanese of
What
roughly
the
6 to
hell?
1. The invasion fleet set sail on the 2nd
What
of
the
November
hell?
1274 from the southern end of the Korean peninsula. They first reached the island of Tsushima, which is featured in the video game Ghost of Tsushima. The island consisted of two main islands separated by a narrow strait. The Mongols would use a two-pronged assault, hitting both islands via 4 places on its western coast. Each island they attacked at 2 spots, with the main bulk of their force hitting the southern island at Sasura. Their vessels spotted by islanders on the evening of the 4th of November. This provided the island's deputy Jido, a man by the name of So Skekuni, with some time to hastily scramble together a defense. The Japanese were superstitious in the sense they believed in kami, or spirits and omens. On the day the Mongols approached, a shrine dedicated to Hachiman, the god of war, caught on fire. While the fire was quickly extinguished, supposedly as messengers were to deliver news of this as a bad omen. Just then, a flock of white doves landed upon the shrine's roof, and it was then instead interpreted as a warning, not as a disaster. Skekuni's command consisted of 80 mounted samurai warriors and their followers. He led them over a mountain pass at night to take up positions near the Mongol main assault landing force at Sasura. It must have been a tense wait for dawn. For dawn, however, would not arrive before the Mongols. At roughly 2 a.m. they landed, and intense, ferocious fighting would break out at 4 a.m. Skekuni had taken an interpreter along to see if discourse with the Mongols was possible, but it was not, as the Mongol reply would be a volley of arrows fired overhead as 1,000 of their warriors from the beachhead charged the Japanese. Skekuni had his samurai return a volley of arrows back, and their precision archery managed to kill many of the Mongols, but yet they charged. As the fighting raged on the beaches, 2 Japanese boats managed to slip through the Mongol fleet to take a message to the rest of the Japanese islands that the war had started. Saito
Damn.
Escasada,
They sold.
Skekuni's closest men, had enthusiastically attacked and killed a high-ranking senior Mongol officer who, along with his group, had gotten stuck in a grove of beachside trees. The Mongols returned fire at him, first with a stone-hurling catapult, then a volley of arrows, 3 of which pierced deeply into his chest. Half of Skekuni's followers would die from the overwhelming Mongol numbers, but even as their number dropped below half and then a quarter, they fought on bravely until all, including Skekuni, were dead. The Mongols would set fire to every building in the vicinity and slaughter most of the inhabitants. They would spend another 9 days securing the island before leaving to head for the smaller island of Iki to the south on the 13th of November. The deputy Jido there, a man by the name of Taira Kagetaka, was said to have hailed from the family by the same name that was defeated during the Genghis War. Kagetaka had received word of the coming Mongols while he was at his castle headquarters.
What's the point of taking this
Sent
island?
urgent word to Dazaife on the main south island of Japan for reinforcements. Kagetaka and his followers fought similarly on the beaches when the Mongols landed. They had arrived later in the day, so despite losing half his men,
Like, why
the Mongols
not
would retreat
go
back to their ships
around
at
and just
nightfall,
go straight to
giving
Japan?
Kagetaka and his men some reprieve. So he ordered what was left of them back to his castle. In the castle, they hoped to hold out and protect the women and children until mainland reinforcements could come. By morning, though, they were surrounded by the full landing force and their red-bannered war tugs. The Japanese women would take up arms in an attempt to bolster the defense, but the Mongols shattered the castle's front gate, and with no relief forces having arrived to assist, Kagetaka prepared to lead his men out with a final arrow assault and charge.
I was about to say just surrender,
The
bro.
courtyard,
But I
hundreds of their
forgot
fellow
this is
countrymen
feudal
from the
Japan.
surrounding villages had been tied up into a human shield. In response,
They
some
will
of the
fall
Japanese
on their
dropped their
sword
bows,
before
unsheathed their
surrendering.
swords, and charged at the Mongols. Although they were said to have fought valiantly, the Mongols overwhelmed them, and Kagetaka and his family and most of his senior men would commit ritual suicide. All would be slaughtered save one, Kagetaka's daughter, whom he had sent to Dazaife with one of his trusted samurai the day before. The Mongols would next turn their attention towards the main Japanese islands. The Japanese, at the regional seat of government in Dazaife, had already been alerted by messengers of the events in Tsushima and Iki, and surmised correctly that to get there, the Mongols' most likely safe landing spot would be Hakata Bay. Enthusiastic defense preparations were made. Japanese records indicated that in the surrounding 9 provinces, horsemen gathered, each trying to outdo the other. Joni Kanesuke, the younger brother of the Shugo, would take up defensive positions near the Hachiman Shrine. The Mongol plan was to move eastwards along the coast to Hakata and then turn inland up the river to Dazaife. Accounts state that the pace of the fighting was initiated by the Mongols. They disembarked from their ships, mounted their horses, raised their red war banners, and began their attack as they had the previous 2 occasions. It was said that the Japanese grandson of one of the commanders loosed a single arrow to initiate combat per tradition. This was said to have been met with raucous laughter from the Mongols. They used tactics that were so unfamiliar to the Japanese, such as advancing on foot in large dense groups protected
It
by
seems like they had the upper hand.
at this point generally fought more as individuals in those war bands, seeking out worthy opponents to accrue glorious accounts of individual prowess. The Mongols quickly secured the heights of the landing areas with a general
How did they fumble this?
war drums. These commands indicated whether troops should retreat in times of trouble or advance. The Mongols would also surround prearranged Japanese positions and use their explosive iron and paper balls strategically whenever they advanced or had to retreat. The Mongols pushed through the Japanese at the beach and towards Dazaife. The Japanese preparing to make their last stand at Mizuki Castle, which was the lone buffer left between them and Dazaife. The Mongols would arrive by dusk of that same landing day, having quickly moved inland. The defenders were under the command of Shoni Kanesuke. He managed to shoot a senior Mongol commander who was said to have been over 6.5 feet tall, or 2.1 meters, shooting him in the face and capturing his horse. There's speculation that the
An
loss
Asian
of all
man,
these
6.5
commanders was the
feet
reason the Mongols
tall.
did not push on to Dazaife.
That's
The Mongols would
insane.
instead retreat back to the beaches and the ships, but burning all in their path back, sparing no one. They were estimated to have lost a third of their forces, though. While this would be, from the Japanese point of view, most certainly a victory, we don't know exactly what the Mongol initial plan was. Perhaps it was a hit-and-run raid meant to sow fear and force a capitulation. We've
So
no
that's how
records
they
of
fumbled
Kublai
it.
Khan's reaction to the invasion or
They
how
didn't
much
really
he knew.
fumble. They just
What
had a
we do
weird
know
strategy.
is that the next year, he again sent 2 envoys to Japan. The envoys, based on records, did not take the most direct route. Perhaps they had some glimpse of what fate awaited them, for they would take 2 months to arrive, and no sooner would they arrive with their great Khan's message than they would be beheaded. Nothing similar had been recorded occurring to the previous Mongol envoys to Japan. The Khan's hope, likely that the Japanese were ready to capitulate before a second invasion attempt. But the message that they sent back via the beheadings was one that capitulation would not happen easily.
Did they
When
send the
Kublai
head
Khan
back?
finally received word about the disastrous first invasion, he would attempt to send troops to Korea to prepare for a second war. Then they commanders shooting their Mongol commander, who were under the command over 6.5 feet tall, or 2.1 meters, shooting him in the face and capturing his horse. There's speculation that the loss of all these commanders was the reason the Mongols did not push on to Dazaife. Third, new to the
so they
previous
lost their
Diva
commanders.
second, but he would rescind the order, as this
Yeah, I was
was
gonna
when
say,
his
what was
armies were in their
so
final push to the Song's
damning
southern
about the
capital
first
shown
invasion?
earlier. The Great Khan therefore must have realized focusing his eastern military efforts on the Song's capital was the more prudent plan. This would provide the Japanese with 7 years of intervening peace, but they would regardless make preparations for what they likely knew was a delayed but incoming storm. They would make preparations both of a physical defensive nature, but also based on their perceptions of events, religious ones as well. The physical preparations included the construction of a long defensive wall along the shore of Hakata Bay. The length close to 20 kilometers in its entirety, east to west. It was built in most places roughly 50 meters from the shore and meant to hold the Mongols at bay to provide enough time for countermeasures. Those who displayed cowardice during the first invasion were dealt with, and heroes displaying valor and courage were rewarded. A new round of recruitment for samurai was also initiated in 1276, one that was irrespective of their vassal status. They had also planned to preemptively raid Korea, but did not end up committing the resources. They did not bolster the defenses on Iki or Tsushima, however, indicating their acceptance of both likely being overrun and their confidence being placed instead on the potential beachhead again at Hakata Bay. In 1277, they learned of the defeat of the Southern Song and must have known the Mongols would once again cast an eye towards their shores. In 1279, the Khan would send yet another last-ditch envoy attempt, but like their predecessors, they too were executed upon landing on Japanese shores. The following year, in 1280, he would summon a top-level conference at one of his summer palaces to discuss the strategy for the second invasion. Having learned lessons from the first, it was clear this one would be of a much larger scale. The wreckage of Mongol ships that were found contained farming implements on them, indicating the Mongols were prepared for a permanent, long-term occupation of Japan. Also different was this attack would be two-pronged, one fleet from Korea as before, and a second, this time, from southern China. It's clear that these were still not always the best soldiers, as those were likely engaged elsewhere in the empire, as records show that prisoners were given commuted sentences to serve in the second invasion. And despite the contribution from southern China, Korea would again bear a disproportionate portion of the burden. While 600 warships were commissioned from the Chinese, the Koreans had to prepare 900. Again, troop estimates were prone to exaggeration and either under or overestimated, depending on which side tells the account. Best estimates are an army roughly 3 times the size of the Mongol force from 1274, and the Japanese also likely much larger than the defensive force from the previous attempt. The order from the Khan to attack Japan was given on the first lunar month.
I know they have home field advantage, but imagine losing
Korea would be carried out similarly to the first invasion.
90,000
consisting of the south of the Yangtze force would sail across 768 kilometers of ocean to meet up with the eastern forces and then combine near the island of Iki for a single massive attack. The Mongol military general Arakan was given supreme command of the invading forces, and he would travel with the southern fleet. The eastern route Mongol army from Korea set sail on the 22nd of May 1281, but took longer than the first fleet in 1274 to arrive at Tsushima, arriving on the 9th of June. Without recorded reinforcement and resigned to the same fate of his late father, So Moriaki, son of Skesada, would meet the overwhelming Mongol landing party and die. 300 islanders would be killed, and of these, some had taken children and women to hide in the mountains, but Mongol patrols found these too and slaughtered them. What forces the Japanese did have on the islands were on Iki, which the Mongols breached on the 14th of June. A Japanese army under the command of Shoni Sketoki and Yuzo Sketoki, said to have been in the low thousands to meet the Mongols on the western Iki beaches, where they were routed and killed. The Mongols were to have waited for the southern army to arrive, but for some unrecorded reason they did not, attacking both islands immediately instead. It's likely that spies from China provided intelligence on the wall defense at Hakata. Even after Iki, the Mongol Eastern Fleet did not wait for the south to join them, instead splitting their eastern fleet in two, one to attack Hakata and the other to head east and attack Nagato at the tip of Honshu. This occurred on the 25th of June, but details are scarce. We do know that there's no recorded damage, only rumors that the fleet had been seen. The Eastern Fleet half that was to land at Hakata Bay did not have the anticipated element of surprise. The Japanese had not only manned sections of the wall with archers, but breaking with tradition, had received direct orders to fully cooperate as a whole. Mongol crafts that made attempts to land on the shores were met with volleys of arrows from archers hidden behind the walls where they could not return fire. While the Mongols did not likely incur heavy casualties, they did make a decision to delay landing for now and instead take possession of the two bay islands of Shiga and Noko. Although Shiga Island was really more of a peninsula in that it was connected by a thin strip of sandbar to the mainland. The Japanese, though, rather than sit back, would take the fight to the Mongol ships that laid anchor. They attacked via the sandbar on foot, but their most successful tactic was one of utilizing a large number of smaller vessels to attack the much larger ocean-going Mongol fleet, the mass of the small ships providing makeshift bridges by which to climb on board the Mongol vessels. Some samurai were said to have swam over to the Mongol ships to attack. We know that those successful boarding attempts resulted in the taking of Mongol heads for future reward. Ultimately, it would be the success, though, of the little ship raids that would pay the largest dividend for the Japanese against their invader foe. Finally, on the 7th lunar month in July, the Southern Fleet arrived. Plans between them would be fleshed out over the course of July and would result in a new target, the island of Takashima, roughly 50 kilometers further west of Hakata Bay. On the 12th of August, as the Mongol fleet neared Takashima, the Japanese little ship fleets were there to meet them. Fighting initiated almost immediately, and it raged on through the night for many bloody hours. While details of the storms said to have assisted the Japanese during the first invasion are suspect, there is definitive archaeological evidence for a great storm assisting them during the second. As the ship battles raged on for days, with the Mongols not able to make any landing attempts and the Japanese likely being mostly fended off in the more open water, neither side could make much headway. At some point later in the month of August, which is midway during typhoon season, a storm came rolling in. As it neared, it intensified in its ferocity. It was recorded that ships near the shore collided with each other, snapping free or flailing about at the end of their anchor ropes. Men were washed overboard and drowned or dashed against the rocky shores nearby. Those in the deeper waters cut anchor to try to ride out the storm. The sound of splitting timber must have rivaled that of the storm collapse itself. We don't have exact numbers for the loss of life, but a Korean source says that of the 27,000 Koreans sent on the eastern route, 7,500 did not return, indicating a casualty rate of roughly 30%. It's interesting that the Chinese and Mongol sources indicate a casualty rate of 60 to 90. Was this perhaps to save face? Again, speculation, as we don't have 60 to 90. Was this interesting in that the Chinese and Mongol sources indicate a casualty rate of 60 to 90? Was this perhaps to save face? Again, speculation, as we don't have definitive evidence. Those boats that had cut free would make their way back to China and Korea, abandoning any survivors who managed to wash up on the shores to their fate. And their fate being slaughter at the hands of the Japanese, who carefully rounded the shorelines and the waters in vessels, killing any and all survivors. Some sources say, though, that the Song Chinese, whom the Japanese felt were coerced into joining the attack on Japan, were spared. But even their fate would be that of slaves. Speculation on the discrepancy between the Korean and Mongol Chinese estimates rages on to this day, with some feeling that the Eastern Fleet was more battle-hardened. But again, we don't have definitive evidence. A third attempt was tossed around, but soon the Khan would be embroiled in a series of frontier battles, and the invasion of Japan would fade into history. But not in Japan. There it would become a source of national pride, and a sort of divinity cult would arise around the kamikaze, which they would call the Great Typhoon that struck the Mongol fleet. And here ends the Mongol invasions of Japan. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please...
So basically, long story short, the Japanese were just better. Like, they were outnumbered, outgunned, outmaneuvered. They just kicked the Mongols' ass. I mean, they had the storm that helped them. But, I mean, if they're fighting at sea, a storm's going... I know, like, they had the small boats at sea. Some of them were still on land. But if you're at sea, that's going to affect you as well. So, it's not like the storm was pro-Japanese. It came through and was just destroying stuff. Which is insane that they won that. How did they win that? I don't know, but shouts out to them, man. It's probably just a fighting spirit, like how they were talking about, like, after the first invasion, if you showed cowardice, you were executed, and the people who didn't show cowardice and, like, really put on in the first invasion, they were rewarded heavily, so they probably just had more incentive to fight harder. Because, I mean, if you're the Mongol force, like, what are you really invading for? Because they decapitated some, what are they called? Ambassador. They decapitated some ambassadors. It made you a little mad, so that's why you're fighting. I guess the Japanese just had more heart. They just wanted it more. That's cool, man. I love learning about these battles and the invasions. I wish they went more in... No, they did pretty... That was pretty detailed about the strategy, the equipment they had. That was a really good documentary. I liked it a lot. I just wish we had, like, some... Like... I don't know. I mean, he went into it so detailed. I don't think there's anything he could have said more. It might have just been the Japanese just wanted it more. Like, I just wanted something that'd be like, oh, this was the turning point. I guess it was the storm was the turning point, and the Japanese just wanted it more. I don't know. Shoulder shrug. But shouts out to them. Shouts out to the Japanese, man. They did their thing. they did their thing. Yeah, that was Japanese versus the Mongols. If you like the video, like the video. Sub to the channel if you're new, or if you're old and you haven't subbed, why haven't you subbed yet? You like it, you love it here, so sub to the channel. I'd greatly appreciate it. It does wonders for my videos, does wonders for my esteem, does wonders for my will to keep making these videos. So please like the video if you like what you saw. And this was the last video of the stream. So peace out, man, y'all. This was a mega stream, going at it for 2 hours and 14 minutes. This is my longest stream I've ever done. So if you're watching this on Twitch, I do apologize for all the disconnections and reconnections, but this will get chopped up onto YouTube and be a bunch of different videos. So if you're seeing this on YouTube, man, go follow me on Twitch, because you missed out on a great stream, and I would love to have you guys in the chat so we can talk about all the things we're seeing. And I shall catch you on the flip side, man. I'll be back Monday for anime. I might try to stream, because I'm going to be playing Black Flag when I get home tonight instead of streaming it manga, since I already stream manga. So I might stream some Black Flag if I get something fun. If you made it this far into the video, I'm going to leave this part on the end of the Mongol video. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see some Black Flag gameplay, because I love Black Flag. And yeah, I'm going to be running that up. So if you'd like to see that, we could throw in a video game stream in one of these days. But alright, man. I need to take a nap. I'm tired. Y'all be safe. Y'all be easy. Peace